Greetings, Kindred. I am Voivode Maquette, and welcome back to my World of Darkness, where today we're going to be going over the next installment of the Thicker Than Water Chronicle. For those of you who have been paying attention, we're starting to go into other realms of the World of Darkness. I run primarily Vampire, as you all have seen, the occasional stint of Hunter, but I'm trying to branch out into other avenues of the World of Darkness and show them that Portland, Oregon, where our game is set, is not just home to Kindred, that there are in fact other denizens of the dark living in the shadows. And recently, not only have they come across a werewolf that lives in the slums of Old Town Portland, but they also ran into a mage who lives in a townhouse in Uptown Portland. So they're starting to realize that there are other things out there. And yes, they've known that these things existed, but they never really had to interact with them, except for one little stint with a werewolf a little while back. But at this point in time, they're starting to learn about deeper realms, such as the Umbra. And they're now on the hunt for what they know as a Bane living in Portland that has escaped due to a incomplete ritual that was done thanks to the Black Sheep portion of this chronicle. So several scenes occurred in this past game session. The first one being Lorenzo meeting with a couple retainers. The first one he talked to, he decided that he wanted to try to recreate the blood mead that the mage gave to him. Being part of the Hecata, the retainer happened to have knowledge of another form of blood that used to be considered a delicacy within the Dark Ages. Something that the Cappadocians used to use to impress individuals within the rankings of the courts in the Dark Ages, called revivified blood. And what revivified blood is actually when you take dead blood and make it so that it gives nourishment. This is not something that tastes particularly good. In fact, it's noted to have a very dusty, moldy flavor, but it does give nourishment. It does take away hunger issues. And because of that, it is actually considered a chosen taste for the upper crust, at least in the Dark Age system. So he has some retainers looking into blood alternatives at this point. Now, his other retainers he sent to Teenies in the Pearl District to try to find out why exactly the owners of that club have not been paying rent, even to Sal Putinesca. Now, the next scene, we have Lorenzo again talking with Tinia about Win. Now, Win is something that is just now coming up. We are in late November in our game right now, and Win, Richard Win to be specific, is the new mayoral candidate. They're trying to figure out if anybody has their little fingers in him yet. His mayoral campaign is Win Back Portland, and the whole idea is to take Portland away from those who would use it for bad causes, to make sure the homeless get homes, which homelessness is a huge issue in Portland, to make sure that the veterans are taken care of. This man has a lot of supporters in his race for that office. Tinia wants to find a kindred with Soul Scry to look into Win, which actually gets into a very interesting thing because they're trying to find somebody who has this ability, and it's actually become a lot harder than you think. Most of the NPCs most of the SPCs, I should say, in my game are neonates. I do have a fair amount of older vampires, but a lot of them have actually been either beckoned or are expensive. Possibly even the Camarilla who have sat around in the city who just refuse to help the Anarchs. So that does not really work out very well. While she's looking around for that, Amelia and Merrick are talking about the vague stay out of the slums statement that Tinia has given them recently, because Tinia has decided to just not give any information whatsoever about why they're staying out of the slums. We know that there's a werewolf in the slums, and he has threatened the Kindred as payback for the help that he gave them concerning trying to figure out what left the footprints. He basically just said, stay out of this area. Do not feed in the slums. Our next scene takes place at the last drop, which, as always, we find Miles playing chess with Duke. Griffin is there doing his rounds of social interaction with the local Anarchs. And then also we have Lucas, our lovely little gangrel, playing bullet chess with Valentino. We actually ended up doing a couple of tests to see if he could beat Lucas, and Lucas being he was like lead of his middle school chess team, so that didn't turn out too well for Valentino. Merrick and Amelia actually arrive at this point because they want to talk to Tinia about the situation that's going on in the slums. And after some poking and prodding, they were able to actually get Tinia to admit that there's a werewolf in the slums and to avoid going in there because they will attack. Merrick's a little taken on edge by this because he's usually used to them hanging around the edges of the city where the woods start taking place, where you start getting to heavier forested areas. The fact that they're inside of the city is just something that he's not prepared to deal with whatsoever. Now, they also continue this conversation that they have been having about Wynn and his interest in the McCarthy property, because some digging has found out that Richard Wynn is trying to buy up the Olympic City, and that he has several interests involving mining, weapons production, medical facilities. He's got his fingers in a lot of pies. So he's starting to really catch the interest of the local Kindred. Now, this is also where they're starting to find out that the Anarchs do not have as much political pull as the Camarilla does. And this is kind of a big duh factor, but it's also something that they just didn't really think was going to be a huge concern. But when it comes to Wynn, he's also been involved in the city's environmental health for several years now. So he is something that he's been an up-and-coming power in the background of the city's political system. Then Merrick goes ahead and asks Valentino if the Hecata have any hold over Wynn. Valentino then calls Lorenzo, finds out there's no connections, and there's so much sarcasm between Valentino and Lorenzo. Valentino has proven to not be the most reliable Hecata in Lorenzo's eyes, and I think that it's actually starting to chip away at the structure that they have in the city, because yes, Valentino is useful. He runs a morgue. He's easy to hide bodies. He's easy to get materials for necromancy rituals. But the truth is, Michael, Valentino's retainer, who's also Lorenzo's cousin, could very well handle the exact same thing and not even have to be embraced, making it so that he could very well work during the daytime. Michael's actually a very solid connection into that industry. Now, it goes back and forth about several topics in this area, and then the slums yet again come back up because they're trying to find out what exactly the Kindred were doing when they found out that there was a werewolf. So Tinia then gives Merrick a straight answer about Ghost, which brings up the concept of Lucas, who also mentions Nick. This is something that the Anarchs didn't know about, is the fact that there was an unknown Kindred that the Hecata found, basically hanging out in the slums and other areas like that. and nobody even knew about it. And there needs to be basically a registry or at least a tally of how many Kindred are in the city, so that they can like make sure feeding doesn't go awry, or make sure that nobody's out embracing and causing huge problems. Where yes, the Anarchs really don't care about that stuff, but population is something that needs to be taken in consideration a lot of the times when it comes with this. Nick's involvement with the Hecata is, it gets a little sticky here, because where Valentino just straight up says what's going on, Lorenzo gets a phone call from Merrick trying to figure out exactly what dealings they have with this Kindred, this unknown Kindred, and he will not give him up. And I gotta give Lorenzo some credit for this, because when Merrick calls Lorenzo to try to figure out anything, he says that he's under Hecata protection, specifically his, and that it is not his place to give that information. So, yeah. Tinia questions Valentino about the unknown Kindred in the city. Valentino calls Dan of the dead. So we actually had a nice little cameo from Dan for a split second, and asks if they know what Nick's clan is, at least, and they say no. Nick has never actually given any answers to what his lineage might be in Kindred society. Val explains how and where they found Nick, which is actually a huge shock to the majority of the Kindred, because the Anarchs were the ones who were down in that hole, who caused the biggest problem. Mostly, I should say. Not problem, but like, they're the ones who basically eradicated the CERT issue, and they didn't even realize that there was a Kindred down there at the time. So a lot of confusion came out from this. So, of course, Tinia flips out a bit that no one really knows anything about this guy, and then during the phone call with Lorenzo from Merrick, they all decide that they are going to have a meeting and discuss the situation. Now, they decide that this is going to be a small meeting in the Portland Rose Gardens at the pagoda where that first three-faced murder happened. It's agreed that Amelia and Merrick would be accompanying Tinia, but after all the deals are set up, and basically Lorenzo believes that it's just going to be a small group of Anarch officials showing up, Merrick goes ahead and invites Jay to come along with him as a wild card. Basically just so there's one other individual there that Lorenzo did not know about. So we do actually have like the Anarchs trying to make the Hecata uncomfortable. And I think that actually worked out really well. The idea of it throwing off Lorenzo. Like, it didn't really cause too much of an issue him showing up, but there were some Kindred shenanigans that happened afterwards because of that. We are on our sixth scene of what actually happened that night. And Valentino hunts down Nick and tells him about the meeting. Not wanting to cause any trouble, he rushes to the Rose Gardens to attend. That was interesting. I like my one-on-one scenes when one SPC gets to hang out with a player character, and I basically just get to focus on what that character would do in a situation. Valentino, while trying to get a hold of this guy, is able to track down his phone number at the Top Hat, which is the Whistler owned like occult shop in the New Orleans district, and is able to get a hold of him, finding out that he's in a hospital. They meet at the small chapel within the hospital. Valentino tells him what's going on, and not wanting to be, like I said, a huge problem for anybody, but also not wanting to get involved in the politics in the city, Nick rushes on down to the Rose Gardens. But at the Rose Gardens, the meeting at the pagoda happened pretty much simultaneously while this is happening, so Nick and Valentino are going to show up a little bit later. But Merrick was having a very, very hard time not taking charge of this situation. Now, I really should do a video on how I run my SPCs, because I don't have a set script of what my characters do. I just have an idea of who these people are, what these people do, what their personalities are. I basically treat all my SPCs as if they're my own player characters. And just knowing where they are, what they're doing at any given time is really how I run these things. And I did not realize until this moment how hard it was to step down from power for Merrick. That makes a lot of sense, though, because he was Prince. And he was also a Baron. So he had the most grip on the city than any Kindred really ever has since his sire founded a Camarilla Prince in the city. So there was like a series of interruptions of Tinia and like, oh, sorry, not my thing. I'll keep quiet. He's trying really hard to be the nice guy, to be the Mala that Tinia needs in this situation. But he's really having a hard time not just stepping forward. Lorenzo was being very standoffish towards Tinia's questioning at first. The Anarchs were trying to figure out why the SI brought Nick all the way from Afghanistan, because some, questions of his origin were actually answered. And why he was kept separately from the other test subjects. Obviously, they don't know. They are wondering if he's a sleeper agent in some way or a bug, which was actually something interesting I actually never even considered. I have an outset plan for Nick, so I didn't really want to add anything to him, such as him being like some kind of weird like Hunter MK Ultra kind of thing, which is actually kind of funny considering the fact that the code to wake him up was MK17. But the idea that he could be being used as a spy on the other Kindred is something that I had never really considered, but I like the fact that the players went in that direction. In the middle of the meeting, Valentino calls Lorenzo to let him know that Nick is on the way. Lorenzo is getting very, very angry with Valentino at this point, and at this point, he actually tells Valentino that when he gets there, to come in, answer only the questions that he tells him to, and after everybody leaves, he is going to stay and they are going to have a chat. I really did see this ending well for Valentino. Now, when Nick actually shows up, it's really interesting because they've gotten to this like, how do we handle this situation? Everybody's like talking over each other, but then they start hearing the hurried footsteps up the stairs of the pagoda, and Nick comes up, and he's just this really nice guy that everybody seems to instantly like. He's answering all the questions that he can straight off, but unfortunately he doesn't have all of the answers for them. He just tells them that like he just is trying to avoid the politics, that he's not an anarch, he's not Camarilla, he's not Sabat. He's literally was thrown into this whole mess and was just hoping to avoid it. He now sees that he was not able to. The Anarchs question him, of course. He answers to the best of his ability, and he explains that he was an army medic that got embraced and then after that kidnapped by the SI. Went on a hunger strike after a while and fell into torpor and then woke up in Portland. And that's all he knows, is that like while he was being poked and prodded, he just stopped feeding. And for some reason, the SI did not wake him up, because they easily could have. They could have easily given him blood, forced him to drink. They could have easily pumped the blood into him, but they just did not. So he does not know what happened after he fell to torpor. Amelia starts questioning Nick about Wynn for some reason, to see if he has any connections with him. And he tells him that, he tells Amelia that he has a lot of ties, Nick has a lot of ties with the veterans in the area, and that's what he's been doing, is helping people get over, or at least help people deal with military issues such as post-traumatic stress syndrome and things like that. He's just trying to help out as much as he can. That is his hold on his humanity, is trying to make people feel better after horrible experiences that he himself has also gone through. Now, he does tell them that the veteran population is very big on Wynn because of all the promises that this man is making. So at least he does have that kind of thing. He doesn't really know anything other than that. After that, they give Nick the okay. He gives them some contact information, and he is allowed to leave. Amelia, however, has been scrutinizing Nick the entire time he's been there. And Amelia is certain that although Nick did seem kind of like just forthright about most things, he was lying about something. Specifically, that he didn't really know what his clan was, because he claimed Caitiff, but he didn't really seem to be 100% honest about that. After Nick leaves, Tinia and Lorenzo discuss that Nick's code name was Cicada, that there's a clipboard, and in all the confusion that happened when they were rescuing Nick with Dan's frenzy and like everything else that was going on, the clipboard was left in the lab at the bottom of the pit in the Olympic City. So then the Kindred decide that they're going to have to go back into the lab and hopefully find the clipboard. Amelia and Merrick also decide that they're going to go ahead and go to this late night rally, this campaign rally for Wynn that's going on right now. This was actually done for a couple of reasons. One, someone really had to go check on Wynn, find out exactly what was going on. Another thing is Serendipity, which is Amelia's character, really has a hard time playing as long as we do, so that is her out. Amelia was actually built specifically to be able to step out whenever need be, because Serendipity has such a busy work life, and also has other things that she has to do from time to time. So this was actually the first time we got to use that aspect of Amelia, and it worked out really well in my opinion, especially since she was able to get some more in-character information later, which will come up next game. So then Tinia starts heading towards Olympic City, not even thinking that Jay was still there, because he was just sitting there on his phone the whole time in the background. Lorenzo warns Valentino about his loose tongue with the Anarchs. Lorenzo and Valentino head to the Olympic City as well. I really thought that this little scene that was going to happen between Valentino and Lorenzo was going to end with Lorenzo's death. There was even some out-of-character conversation about it, that if Valentino had been an NPC, if he had been an SPC, that there's no way in hell Lorenzo would have let him live. Kind of have some sore marks on that one, because I really don't think that should be a thing. But I also respect Gwen, Lorenzo's player, for understanding that Valentino's player, David, has not been playing as long as a lot of us. I'm actually his first storyteller. He's been around for a few years, but he hasn't really been able to play much. So he's still learning the ropes, but he also likes to play characters that like to stir up stuff. And I think he does a great job with that. In fact, Valentino is my favorite character David has ever played. Now that leaves Jay. So Jay is a ridiculous character all the way around. He is constantly tinkering with things. He's got some secrets. We'll just put it that way. But he did hitch a ride from Amelia and Merrick on the way over here. So Amelia and Merrick left. Tinia left. Valentino and Lorenzo left, leaving Jay alone at the pagoda. When he decided that it was time to leave and realized that he didn't have a ride, he did a little bit of a check and found a discarded Segway that was set up for the tours of the park, and he steals it. Did a test, it's at half battery, so he was fine. And he drove it down towards the Olympic Park too, so it took him a little while to catch up. So our next scene is actually Tinia arriving at the Olympic City. There's a sign outside the fence that says Henry and Henry Mining. In little letters underneath, it says a Pentex company. I really love adding these little things. We used O'Toole's in the Chicago Chronicle, which actually is not, I didn't write that, but like it was the first instance that a Pentex company showed up. And now there's just more and more of them showing up inside Portland itself. I like that because I have a couple of older werewolf players that play in my game, and the looks on their faces when I mention something like that really just irks them, and it's a lot of fun. So Tinia soaring leaps over the fence, and sees that on the inside everything is lit up. All of the lights that Cert had plugged into the area are on, plus all of the street lights for the Olympic City are active. She actually sees that there are security. There's like security golf carts driving around. She sees where the security station is, which is just a small trailer, that there's a few carts there, and that it's all lit up, and then decides that she's going to go ahead and head straight for the med building as best as she can, realizing that although it's not snowing now, it had been snowing before. And not only is she making a racket trying to walk through the crunching of the snow, it's also leaving a very defined path where she's walking, from where she landed on the other side of the fence all the way to the medical lab. Tinia, at that point, getting to the medical lab, decides that she is not turning back, that she needs to do this. She's going to work fast. And the medical lab has at least been slightly, not repaired per se, but closed up. There are hurricane shutters over the windows that had been broken. And they're just held on with wing nuts. So she gets to work really, really quick undoing those things. So as Tinia is trying to do this is around the time Lorenzo and Valentino catch up. And Val goes into Tenebros Avatar and rides Lorenzo's back. That seems to be his favorite way of doing things, is being the obtenebration for another character. I know I get a lot of back and forth on the fact that Valentino has obtenebration form of Oblivion, but that's just because I went ahead and made the house rule decision that since the Pisanob are so adept at the necromancy ceremonies, that I did not put a limitation to him on what Oblivion he could have. And what I mean by that is, like, he could have Oblivion that doesn't match quite right to the ceremonies that it's supposed to go with. That also brings up the consideration that he could have obtenebration Oblivion, the La Sombra Oblivion, because I just see that as a raw form. It's the same power, but it's not concentrated. It's not set to a methodical way of using it. So that's why he has that. But he goes into Tenebros Avatar. He rides Lorenzo as he also soaring leaps over the fence, and they can see Tinia taking down the hurricane shutters to get into the med lab, where that elevator is that leads down deep into the underground lab of the SI. So they end up catching up with Tinia pretty quick, entering the med building, and they didn't know, the Hecata did not know how to actually get down there, so they ended up using a huge cable as a rope to climb down. Well, Tinia's already been here. Tinia knows how this place works, and she goes up to one of the oxygen tanks on the back of the room and twists some handles, which activates the elevator. So the power is completely on in this place, including to that down in the lab. Unfortunately, when they go down, the noise of the elevator alerts the guards to the fact that there's something happening in the area, and they start to gather. Now, as the guards come out of their trailer to check out what's going on, Jay has arrived outside the gates on his Segway, and he can see the whole commotion going on, noticing that the security guards can see the tracks in the snow from the med building. Unfortunately, more security starts to gather, alerting the fact that there might be more than one security trailer on this area, which isn't actually that strange, because this property is literally the size of a small town off to the side in this city itself. Now, down in the hole, there are 3 of them now, and they have to know that the noise is attracting what's going on. They reach the bottom, and there's nothing but safety lighting on. So everything's just like lit up by this eerie red glow. They see the tube that Nick came from. Also, looks like there has been cleaning done in this area. The tube is actually still open and producing a lot of fog. There's some joking around about how the electric bill must be going crazy because somebody left the fridge open. But it's kind of interesting how this happens. Tinia has no idea that Val is there in shadow form at this point. She just sees Lorenzo. And while they're down there, Tinia then hears a whisper that there's 4 guards at the window of the building. Just that she can hear. What's actually going on with that is Jay has an ability. He has an ability that we're playtesting, which is not part of standard Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition. It is from a book that is available on the Storyteller's Guide called Power Slaves. I will go ahead and I will put a link in the description of this video to check it out. It is probably one of the better editions that I've seen to V5 from the Storyteller's Vault. Granted, I haven't seen many of them, but I really, really, really love this one. A friend of mine lit me up to it, but it's really well done, and he's using a gift from that I really don't want to give away because it'll be too much. But if you've read the book, you probably know what it is. But he's actually whispering to her on the wind itself. And the wind itself travels down, comes to her, and lets her know in his voice that there are 4 guards at the window of the building that they've just gone into. They search the area and they find the clipboard pretty freaking quick that has Nick's info in it. Now, up top, Jay watches a limo pull up at this point in time. The gates open, a limo drives in, and in the hole at this point in time, the lift then begins to rise. Jay then starts annoying the guards by shining a green laser pointer into their eyes. One of the guards investigates, and down below, Tinia gets another whisper. The Bane is on its way. Tinia then tells Lorenzo that it's the Bane coming down. I love this jump to conclusions. It's got to be the Bane. The reason why I love this jump to conclusion is because while they're all scrambling, trying to find places to hide, Tinia goes into obfuscate. Val is hiding on Lorenzo's back still. Lorenzo finds something large that he can hide behind. Tinia also activates the power of premonition on what's on the elevator, like on that subject. And she just sees this menacing, dark, shadowy figure with red glowing eyes and a feeling of dread. It is the Bane. At no other time in my games has a jump to conclusions mat ever actually led to it being what they actually think it is, unless I've written a story, they've jumped to a conclusion, and I've gone, that's better, I think I'll do that instead. But it is actually the Bane. The guards approaching Jay warns that who's ever out there, they're trespassing and the cops are on their way. Jay actually did see them fiddling with their phone. They actually did call the cops. Things seem to be going on a legal basis here. Jay still keeps screwing with them with a laser, however. While the lift is coming down, Tinia and Lorenzo discuss running, but the idea of where, because they are literally in a room and the only exit is being used currently by this thing that could very well be coming down to kill them. The elevator lands and the Kindred are just hiding at this point. Tinia, like I said, went to obfuscate. Lorenzo's hiding behind a large piece of machinery. Valentino is in the shadows, hiding near Lorenzo. The lights come on, and a very normal-looking man is standing by the elevator controls. He seems to know what the hell's going on already. The man they see in the newly lit-up room is, in fact, Richard Wynn, the mayoral candidate. He just appeals to them that they come out and talk. That's it. Says he doesn't want to press charges. Lorenzo comes out, strangely enough. I really didn't expect the person who's known for crime to be the one who goes, "Oh, you caught me trespassing." But that's exactly what he did. He says that Tinia ran, or he says that his companion ran, but the guy disagrees because he just took the elevator down and there's literally no place to run. Tinia comes out of obfuscate. Wynn threatens to take away Valentino's shadows. He actually does that. He actually is like, "Hey, I know there's a third one of you down here, and if you don't come out, I'm just going to go ahead and take away those shadows because I can." So Wynn already knows them by name, which is really, really funny. He's like, "Oh, okay, so you are Lorenzo Putinesca, you are Tinia Jabbar, and you are Valentino Pisanov." And then he's like, "So since we're all on, do you prefer Miss Jabbar? Do you prefer Mr. Pisanov? Do you prefer Mr. Putinesca?" And they start talking about first names. He's like, "All right, fine, you can call me Dick." And everybody has a nice, laugh at that one out of character because, of course, you can't have a villain who goes by the name of Dick or anything like that, or at least what appears to be a villain. So Lorenzo spills everything right away. I have no idea what the hell was going on with Gwen that night, but for some reason, everything that he gets mad at Valentino about, Lorenzo just did to this guy that they don't know at all. And he just spills everything. So Richard Wynn then starts talking about working with them and how the city will be better and they can keep the Camarilla out as a group. How much easier it would be for the Kindred to do what they're doing in the city when they're working with, not controlling, but working with the city council. He seems to be being candid. He admits to being a Bane, but also says that they're vampires and nobody's perfect. That they're all parasites. So what's the problem? Why can't they work together? It's really funny. He goes on and on and on. He actually asks to see the clipboard since Lorenzo just told him everything. But then they kept him talking for about 10 minutes or so until I forgot that he had asked to see the clipboard. So he forgot to see the clipboard, which was really funny. They talked for a little while. He showed them some things that he was doing in the lab. And those things that he was doing in the lab was he had Banes captive. And he was like, "They're gross little guys, aren't they?" And really just was saying that he was using the technology that a couple of the companies have to put Banes in people to remove Banes from people. They asked if it was, if it killed the people, and he's like, sometimes. Like he just tried to be extra candid with everybody to try to get everybody on a trusting basis. And I don't think that was actually working, but they at least were talking to him. I let them ask questions, and he answered whatever he could. Up top, though, Jay is still provoking the guards, and the police actually show up. When he sees the sirens, he bolts. So he gets out of there as fast as possible. Wynn tells them that the cops are there, and he proposes that they stay and get to know each other for a little while. This is a very interesting thing because they're, at this point, they're just acting friendly, which is something that most people don't get when they're interacting with any type of Bane. Now, this is the Bane inside of a person, therefore he is a Fomori. And having a couple of ex-werewolf players, they're very, very nervous about this guy because they know how dangerous Fomori can be. And also, Fomori don't, and this is something that Wynn actually says to them, Banes don't typically think. They run on impulse. They run on instinct. They get what they need, which is specifically one thing, whether it's hunger or lust or violence or some other negative impulse that humans get amplified when they get possessed by these things. But he's a higher level of Bane, and that he doesn't want to see that kind of thing happen. That this, he presents himself to them, that this is what his kind can become over time. Valentino starts taking notes, which is really funny because Wynn doesn't stop him. He lets him do whatever he's going to do. He asks where they learned about Banes. They say a friend of a friend, and he just goes, fair enough. You guys don't trust me yet. Keep your secrets. I'm sure things will come out later on as our relationship grows. It's actually really fun because he has this almost Mr. Rogers style feel to the character. He's just such a nice guy. He says that he's excited to work with them and then just lets them go after the police leave. That's it. They head out without any repercussions for trespassing in his area. He lets them take the clipboard. He says that he's sure that they don't believe him, but that's fine. That again, things will get better over time. I'm allowing the players to choose whether or not the next game session, which is actually for me tomorrow night, whether or not it's going to be after some time so they can do some in-weeks, or if they want to try to do a day-by-day thing. The reason I asked is because the election is in a week from this time. And he could very well be the next mayor. So, are they going to win back Portland? It's an interesting little situation that they've gotten themselves into. And I can't wait to see exactly what they do with it. I do have to ask, have any of you out there who watch this used Banes in your vampire stories? I know they're very popular in werewolf stories, but I want to know what you guys have done. Have you guys used them? Have your vampires ever interacted with a Bane in any way, or a Fomori in any way? I am Voivode Maquette. This has been my World of Darkness, and I hope you guys stay interested to see what happens next time. Have a good evening.